Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, welcome to Robservations, the show about something. And I, of course, am the Viceroy of Verisimilitude, the master of fun and wonder, the existential Mr. Rogers, Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett. And of course, Gilbert and Tallulah are here as well. Did you miss me? I was gone for 2 days. I was working on Tango Shalom, doing all kinds of craziness, recording some Inglorious Trexperts. Sometimes I have to work. Bobby got to eat. Anyway, I am back, and today, what a glorious day. First of all, this chat is being brought to you by, of course, Lucky Tiger Men's grooming products for those men who want to look good and feel great. And of course, with Christmas rolling in, it's closing in on us like the fog bank in John Carpenter's The Fog. It's just rolling right over us. It's coming. It's coming. And if you go to the Lucky Tiger website at getluckytiger.com, look, Gilbert's already barking. You can punch in PGS when you check out and buy any of their great products, and you get 20% off your order. And you should go and buy their stuff because I like it. And of course, we're still giving away, apparently, there were 2 other winners of Lucky Tiger, bottles of Lucky Tiger head to tail body wash, and I don't know the names of them. Apparently I'm remiss. Come on, Gilly, don't be barking. The dogs, it's raining here in Pasadena. The dogs do not like the rain. But anyway, what can I do? I've already given them cookies. He knows he's had cookies. He's just barking because he knows he's on the internet. But today is a glorious day, ladies and gentlemen, gentle beings, aliens from all over the galaxy. Let me tell you what happened today, as if you all don't already know. The first trailer for the 25th official James Bond movie, No Time to Die. No Time to Die dropped today. And as you all know, I'm a lifelong fan of the James Bond franchise. And even though most of the time, I wouldn't say most of the time, but I don't even think that the rate, the percentage of great Bond films is even 50-50. I would say maybe the percentage, just off the top of my head, very unscientifically, I would say I've probably loved 35% of the James Bond films. Of the 24 official movies and the movies that are not part of the official continuity, the first Casino Royale from, actually, there's been 3 James Bond. Here's a trivia. If somebody asks you in movie trivia, if you're playing movie trivia in a pub somewhere, and somebody asks you, how many times have they made Casino Royale? You know what the answer is? It's 3 times. That's right. Once it was done for American television, where Barry Nelson played Jimmy Bond. You had Peter Lorre as Le Chiffre. That was done for TV, available on Blu-ray. Then, of course, there is the late 60s version of Casino Royale, the spoof with David Niven and Woody Allen and a cast of thousands. And then, of course, there was the first Daniel Craig James Bond Casino Royale. That was the first, it was an adaptation of the novel. They went back to Fleming's original novel, and I mean, they did with the Barry Nelson American TV version, but amazingly enough, and actually that was pretty faithful, but it's very different watching an American play James Bond, Jimmy Bond. It doesn't really work, but it's an interesting artifact out of time. That was the first time that Casino Royale was shot. But we also have 1983's Never Say Never Again, which is basically what Kevin McClory got as a consolation prize after fighting a court battle for most of his adult life against Broccoli's, and ridiculous. There's a lot going on there, but I've loved the Bond franchise. My entire life, I love the James Bond franchise. I loved James Bond when I was a little kid. I still love James Bond now. And I have to say, of all of the eras of James Bond, to be honest, collectively, there's been 4 Daniel Craig Bond films so far, and I have probably liked the Daniel Craig run as Bond the least, even though you could probably say that those 4 films are the most accomplished. But I've really only loved one of them, which is Casino Royale, and I liked Quantum of Solace, which a lot of people say is controversial to even like that movie. And I was not a big fan of Skyfall at all, and I thought Spectre was kind of a snooze. But you know what? Here's the thing. I enjoy watching the Bond franchise. I've said that my whole life, and I get very excited when a new James Bond movie comes out. The first movie I ever saw, the first James Bond movie I saw in a theater was 1977's The Spy Who Loved Me. And it was when, of course, Bond, I've said this before on the show, Bond went back to the epic format after 1971's Diamonds Are Forever. Both Live and Let Die and Man with the Golden Gun were not even widescreen movies. They tried to make them on the cheap because obviously Roger Moore took over the role. They had to see where it was going to go. But in 77, they brought Bond back to his widescreen glory when they made a widescreen epic in Spy Who Loved Me and followed it up with Moonraker. And of course, as a kid who grew up with James Bond on television, being able to go to the movie theater and see a first-run Bond film like The Spy Who Loved Me, which is still my favorite Roger Moore Bond and one of my favorite films of the entire franchise, was amazing to see. Now, one of the things about Bond, well, first of all, there's an article. I want to read an article. It just dropped on the Hollywood Reporter. This article dropped at 12:24 p.m. So it dropped an hour and a half ago. And it was written by Richard Newby. Yes, Richard Newby wrote this. And in response to the release of the trailer for No Time to Die today, here's what he wrote. Daniel Craig's fifth outing in the franchise looks to tie the mythology together for a grand finale. We all have our secrets, James Bond says in the first trailer for No Time to Die, and by the looks of things, they're all about to come crashing down around him. The 25th James Bond film, directed by Cary Jody Fukunaga, marks Daniel Craig's final outing as the iconic MI6 secret agent. If the trailer is any indication, 007 will be going out in style, with new gadgets, new allies, new adversaries, and the welcome return of some familiar faces. No Time to Die is truly shaping up to be the culmination of all the story threads introduced over the course of Craig's 5 Bond films: Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, Skyfall, and Spectre. By the way, that element of these films is, I think, the weakest, and they've served to diminish the franchise as a whole. But anyway, I'll get more into that. While it's a given that Bond will continue on, with rumors circulating for years about who will replace Craig, will the arc of these 5 films give the iteration of Bond a sense of closure? I doubt it, because it was not conceived of as being some kind of a grand design, and they've sort of retconned the films as they've gone along. And like the Star Wars movies, I have felt that the idea of continuity in these films is, I think, wrong-headed and part of the mistakes that they've made with the Daniel Craig Bonds. But whatever, they're very lucrative, so what do I know? For a series that has traditionally shown little investment in continuity or overarching storylines, Craig's series has favored the character development that relying on the previous installment can provide. While Casino Royale acted as a reboot, Quantum of Solace dispensed with the idea of a standalone adventure and provided a coda to Craig's first outing. Skyfall, a celebration of Bond's 50-year history, seemed to operate as a standalone film while also giving us a sense that Craig's Bond had been operating much longer than his 2-film history would suggest. Spectre, much like Quantum, proved to be somewhat controversial, not only by tying to the previous film, but creating a master plan at the heart of Craig's run, all orchestrated by Bond's adoptive brother, Franz Oberhauser, better known as Blofeld. Complaints that this connective tissue weakened previous entries and the agency of characters like Vesper Lynd and Silva led many to speculate that Craig's final outing would go the standalone route, with Craig evoking the films of Roger Moore and a lighter tone than what had come before. But the latest trailer proves that's not the case, and if anything, No Time to Die is doubling down on the connective tissue that has defined this most recent iteration of Ian Fleming's famed Spy. Although Bond and Dr. Madeline Swan, Léa Seydoux, rode off into the sunset at the end of Spectre, their honeymoon seems short-lived. So apparently Bond has married, or did marry, Madeline Swan, who, of course, if you all remember, she's a psychologist, and she is also the daughter of Mr. White, who was introduced at the end of, well, he was introduced in Casino Royale, and we saw him in the boot of Bond's car at the beginning of Quantum of Solace. And, of course, Madeline Swan is his daughter. but they were estranged when she found out he was involved with Spectre and what a bad guy he really was. While many fans presumed that Swan would be killed off in the film's opening, an allusion to Tracy's death, Diana Rigg's death in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, it looks like No Time to Die has something far more interesting in store than the dead wife trope. Bond's paranoia appears to drive a wedge between him and Madeline. His trust issues come naturally, having been betrayed by Vesper in Casino Royale, which became the defining moment in Craig's take on the character. Bond's inability to form lasting relationships feels crucial to the stakes of the film. Whatever happens between Bond and Madeline, it appears that some time passes between the ambush at the opening of the trailer and the later minutes that see a retired Bond called back into action by M, Ralph Fiennes, and Felix Leiter. It seems that Bond's position as MI6's top agent has been passed on to Nomi, who is rumored to have taken over the 007 number. But the need for Bond to return to duty is yet another thread throughout Craig's films, in that the character must once again prove he's relevant in the modern world. This is also a meta-commentary on the franchise itself, one that has consistently been tasked with evolving over the decades and has, more than a few times, come in behind the espionage films of the new school, like the Mission Impossible films, Bourne, John Wick, and the Fast and Furious franchises. Add the upcoming Black Widow to the mix, which just saw its first trailer released yesterday, and it's easy to see why Bond has to distinguish itself amongst its counterparts. Bond frequently cribs a bit from the current popular media, be it Star Wars and Moonraker, The Bourne Identity in Casino Royale, or The Dark Knight and Skyfall, but it always does so with a bit of classicism that still feels unique and unexpected amongst competing franchises. Among those aspects is the return of Blofeld. It was unclear how substantial the role would be, and he wasn't featured on the character posters released earlier this week, but it seems that Waltz's turn as Bond's most recognizable and frequently appearing adversary will be crucial and set Bond's final mission in motion. Blofeld's master plan might not be over yet, but it may be just part of a larger conspiracy, one that sees Rami Malek's masked villain Safin take the stage. The Phantom of the Opera getup, masking a scarred visage, gives Safin the appearance of a supervillain and could be the film's conscious effort to play with some of the cinematic language of the superhero films that have dominated the box office. Swan also seems to have ties to the character and a mask of her own. It's worth remembering that she is the daughter of the now deceased Bond villain Mr. White, Jesper Christensen. While these connected story threads that benefit from audiences rewatching the previous four entries may have been what saddled Spectre, the trailer suggests that they will be bolstered by more propulsive action sequences and the suspense of this being a final outing. Safin notes that Bond could be his own reflection, that this isn't the first time we've seen Craig's Bond faced with a dark mirror image of himself. Vesper, Silva, and Blofeld all have been utilized as the darker sides of Bond. Vesper is Bond lacking loyalty, Silva is Bond lacking country, and Blofeld is Bond lacking family. Each reveal essential elements about Bond's character that his rough exterior hides. So what will Safin reveal? What is he lacking that Bond has? Or perhaps more interestingly, what does he have that Bond lacks? The dialogue between Bond and Safin in the trailer suggests that it may be immortality. Yet another avenue for a meta-commentary on the legacy of James Bond. What better sense of closure for Craig's tenure than for his Bond to confront a manifestation of death head-on? Regardless of whether James Bond lives or dies, the 25th film looks to prove in April, with some sense of finality, that nobody does it better. Well, I thought this was a good article. You know, I really enjoyed that. But I have to say, as a lifelong Bond fan, I really feel that these connections are something that has really weighted down the films. Now, I understand, and I've said this before on the show, when James Bond was introduced in the 60s, back in 1962 with Dr. No, Bond was a trendsetter. No one had ever seen anything like a Bond film before. Its jet-setting ways were brand new for basically a middle class that was created out of the greatest generation that emerged victorious out of World War II and came home to sort of roost and build a nest. And now middle-class Americans and middle-class, well, people that were in the middle class the world over looked at Bond films with their jet-setting ways on new transcontinental jets and all the latest gadgets and the cars and the women and the locations. These were things that most normal people were never going to see, so they could live vicariously through James Bond. And of course, eventually, throughout the 60s, the Bond films, people forget, the Bond movies were a huge phenomenon. When they would come out, Goldfinger was playing 24 hours a day. They were the Avengers Endgame type events that moviegoers had. Now, what happened, I think, which was unfortunate, is that Bond became a franchise that was chasing trends instead of setting trends. In the 70s, we had blaxploitation movies were touched upon in Live and Let Die. Martial arts movies were touched upon in Mouth Golden Gun. And then in 1977, we went back to the epic Bond. And this was sort of after the post-Vietnam era where escapism. 1977 also saw the release of everything. Well, Star Wars came out in 77. And of course, in 79, Moonraker emulated Star Wars and took Bond into space. So the Bond franchise, I think, has been playing catch up. It's interesting to me, if you look at the Bond era, when Living Daylights came out, Timothy Dalton had one love interest because of the AIDS epidemic. Now there have been reports coming out that there's more sexually transmitted diseases in the world again, especially in America. The rates of common STDs have gone way up, which is, what does that mean? I don't know. Bond is now settled down. He's with a woman. He finally gets married for the second time in franchise history. I don't know how that continuity works. Famously, Roger Moore, in the beginning of For Your Eyes Only, does go and visit his wife's grave, Teresa Bond's grave. And of course, as we all know, James Bond famously got married in 1969's On Her Majesty's Secret Service when George Lazenby, in his one and only outing as Bond, at the end of that film, James Bond gets married and his wife is assassinated by Blofeld in a truly shocking moment that any Bond fan always tears up over, when Bond is holding the body of his dead wife and you see him through the shattered glass where the bullet came through the front of their Aston Martin. It's really a sad thing. It's a bummer, but it worked. And I love that movie. On Her Majesty's Secret Service is one of my favorite of the Bond franchise. It's big, it's epic, it's also weird and goofy, and it definitely has a 60s plot to it. It's pretty crazy. Blofeld's going to employ beautiful women to, well, I don't want to ruin it all for you, but it's crazy. It's a crazy film, but I love it. And it's got a great John Barry score. And interestingly enough, like with Dr. No, the opening of the movie, the Bond opening sequence, is an instrumental piece of music that is a great piece of music. The song that is most remembered from On Her Majesty's Secret Service is We Have All the Time in the World. We have all the time in the world. Sung by Louis Armstrong, which is a fantastic song. But anyway, I think the Daniel Craig Bond movies, where they came out of the gate with Casino Royale, which was awesome when it took us back to Bond's beginning. It basically was a complete reboot, even though M was M, and it showed the beginnings of James Bond. It showed where he finally became his first two kills you see in the opening of the film. And what's been really weird about the Daniel Craig Bond movies is while Quantum of Solace is a direct sequel, I mean, you could say that Diamonds Are Forever is kind of a direct sequel because the movie opens with Connery back for his last outing in an official Bond movie. He would show up back in 1983, but in 71, he's hunting Blofeld after the death of his wife, although the connection's always been tenuous. And what they've tried, I think, because during Craig's tenure as Bond, serialized storytelling became popular. Whether it was in the movies or whether it was on television, they wanted serialized storytelling became a thing, and they really wanted to, for whatever reason, and I've never really understood it, and they wanted these movies to be serialized, and they sort of retconned that Blofeld was behind all of this. And what's unfortunate is what the Daniel Craig series needed, and it never really got, was a Man on a Mission movie. All of these films were like tied in together, and by the time you get to Skyfall, where they were completely aping The Dark Knight, and Silva is this a character, he doesn't really have a plan. You don't really know what he's doing, and yet he becomes a diabolical mastermind as if he knew he was going to London, and the movie doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and it's a movie where Bond continually fails. I think what the Craig Bond, his tenure as Bond, what it really was missing was straight up Bond goes on a mission. And I would love it if there were two standalone, because Quantum of Solace is not standalone. Spectre isn't really a standalone movie because Silva's got ties to M and all of that. And I think one of the things that hampered these movies was this desire by the filmmakers to sort of tie it all together. And I think because it was all sort of done after the fact, and they kept playing, I mean, they certainly played the trope of both in Spectre and Skyfall that Bond was old, and now in No Time to Die, he's left the service and he's retired. We never even got to see a series of movies where he went on missions, like straight up missions that had no connection to his past or no connection to anybody he knows. And I think that's the one thing that hampered these movies, because of course the Bourne films, Jason Bourne was tied into the people that he was going after. All the stuff that was going on had something to do with the conspiracy, Treadstone, all of this. And that's another thing that the Bond films took from. The Daniel Craig Bond films were totally influenced by both Christopher Nolan's Batman movies and the Bourne films. And unfortunately, I think what Bond should have done is give us standalone Bond missions like the days of yore, where we could have had, I mean, obviously there was the Cold War and things like that happened. We had Smersh, then we had Spectre. And I think that one of the big problems with these movies is that they just tried to copy other franchises, when really what it would have been nice to see is that the Bond franchise took the time, or he just went off on a mission, a standalone mission. There was a new character introduced who had something bad. Well, now, of course, apparently Rami Malek's villain is tied to Madeline Swan, who's tied to Blofeld, and we never even got to see one of the things I think that's really missing from this new series of movies, and it certainly was missing from Spectre, is that Spectre, aside from taking over the intelligence services of the world, they had no plan. I mean, I long for the days where Spectre, they stole 2 nuclear bombs. They had a pretty good plan, and they instigated it, and a British bomber was landed at sea, and then the divers went in as it sunk down on the undersea landing strip that they had made, and took the bombs, and Bond had to get the bombs, and then the mission was over. And I miss that. I feel like these new Bond films are sort of a half-baked exploration into the existential soul of James Bond and what does it all mean, aside from Casino Royale. You know, Casino Royale was unfettered by all of this. You could have Bond fall in love, and it was fine. And yes, they built around the things that we saw in that movie. But I thought the reason Casino Royale worked so well, it was a pretty straightforward film. And you had Le Chiffre, and it was really based on the first Bond novel, Casino Royale. I thought it worked really, really well. Now, this is not to say, you might be thinking I'm coming down hard on the Bond franchise. I am not. I love the Bond franchise, but I just think that one of the joys of the Bond franchise was seeing what mission he would go on. And there was always, it was sort of, he would be given the mission, he would go on the mission, he would achieve his mission goals, his mission objectives, and then it was over. And it felt like you saw something that was finished. When it was over, it was finished. It was on to the next. And one of the things that I always loved as a Bond fan was this idea that there is no continuity. Now everything has to have continuity, but I like the fact that there was never really, that we had different M's. I mean, Bernard Lee played M until he passed away, and then there was another M, and Desmond Llewellyn stayed. He was Q for a number of different actors who played the role. And so the Bond continuity was never a strength or a strong suit of the franchise. It was never something that anybody was really interested in, but it worked anyway. It didn't bother me. And yet, as continuity and this long form storytelling became important and became the style, the Bond franchise sort of embraced that, but not really, because the movies were not conceived that way. They backed into things, and as a result of Skyfall, inexplicably, Bond is. It could have been the first I'm on a mission movie, but no, they had to tie it all in, and then they had to make Bond get shot off. Like Bond has always known the world. And when he was shot off by Moneypenny, when he was shot off the top of a train, it's like what? He went to sit on a desert island and drink himself into oblivion because he felt bad about what? He hadn't finished his mission. You know, the knock list of the agents was still out there. He didn't complete it because of M demanding that Moneypenny take the shot, and she shot him off and Bond left. And this whole idea, this contrived idea that Bond's missed a step. That's okay. You can admit that. And we got what we got. But yeah, I'm not a fan of Skyfall, but I'm a fan of the whole franchise. I like watching all Bond movies, even the ones I don't love. But anyway, I love the trailer for No Time to Die. I thought it looked great. It's globe-trotting, but once again, Bond goes into the snowy regions of Norway and doesn't ski. And I understand. I mean, how do you get Bond on skis these days? In these kinds of movies, skiing, the skiing sequences in Bond movies and things like on Her Majesty's Secret Service, I love those scenes. For Your Eyes Only has an incredible ski sequence, and I really wanted to see Bond ski, but I guess skiing is, again, as much as I love skiing, it's sort of a thing of the past. By the time you got to View to a Kill, he was snowboarding. But I love this trailer. I love the vistas. I love the cool places he's going to see. I love the different environments. It's almost like a Star Wars movie. We're on Hoth, then we're on Endor, then we're in Canto Bight. You know, it looks like there's a villain lair in this movie somewhere. I mean, I don't know, but it looks like all the Bond tropes. And Cary Fukunaga, who directed True Detective, I'm excited, man. Can you tell? I mean, I'm kind of, as much as I see with the Bond franchise, I'm able to put the past, like if I didn't like something, I don't hold the Bond franchise accountable. Even though I probably should, but I don't. I like whenever I see a Bond movie, the slate is wiped clean when it's over, and I go into every James Bond movie gleefully excited like a little kid, and I don't really worry too much about what came before, because the movies were hit and miss. And they're, as I've gone through my life, like when I was a kid, I really loved Live and Let Die. But as I got older, not so much. I used to love Diamonds Are Forever. I watch it now and it's like interminable. And I didn't like movies like You Only Live Twice as much, but now I like You Only Live Twice. And the movies that I've always loved, From Russia with Love, I think is the purest distillation of the Bond character. I love Goldfinger. I love Thunderball. I love On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I love Spy Who Loved Me. I actually love Moonraker, even though it's goofy. I love For Your Eyes Only. I like Octopussy. I love Living Daylights. I like Goldeneye. I like Tomorrow Never Dies, and I like World Is Not Enough, and I love Casino Royale. What does that say about me? I don't know. But anyway, I'm excited for this. You know, we're going to London. We're going to have a meetup April 2nd. Now, the trailer was dropped this time Universal, unlike the last bunch of movies that Craig was in that were released by Columbia and MGM. This is going to be a Universal release. It opens on April 2nd. It says April 2nd. The trailer that drops at April 2nd. I wonder if that's day and date worldwide, because I've heard the American release is on the 8th. And the whole point about going to England is to see it first with people like I went and saw Skyfall in 2012. But anyway, I feel like I'm a motor mouth now. I'm like, blah, 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 blah. Maybe it's because I was gone for 2 days working. It's just great to be back talking with you all. What do you guys think? Who knows? Let's see. We're going to jump into the chat, see what it has, see what people have to say. Mark C is here. Somebody says that my it's weird that the blue, I'm seeing the indicator is showing that the Yeti mic is in fact picking me up, but Mark C says it is not picking me up. It's weird. That's been happening more than I don't know why. The indicator shows it's picking me up. I don't know. That's odd. But Mark C. also says, I'm curious, Rob, Brandon Routh's natural hair part is on the wrong side to be Superman. Did you ever witness them trying to part his hair on the other side? It's a question I've pondered for 10 years. No. It was always part of the way they wanted to part it. His hair, the spit curl was always an issue, but that was the only thing that was an issue when they were doing it. But yeah. Stubble McShave says, I guess you won't be moonlighting as Mall Santa. No, I don't think I will be moonlighting. I don't know. I'll grow it back. I just, as I was saying before, I need to know a little bit more about beard maintenance, and I didn't have clippers to do it, unfortunately, which bummed me out. Roberto Suarez says, I saw Tampopo over the weekend. Pro tip: your 17-year-old son and 70-year-old mother should not be in the room during the gastroerotic gangster scenes. Yes, for those of you who don't know, there is a Japanese movie from the 80s called Tampopo, which is one of my favorite Japanese films, actually, of all time. It really is. I love Tampopo. I love it so very, very much. And there's a lot of erotic scenes that involve both food and sex. There's this gangster. The movie's, it's very weird, but it has these, it's not very weird, but people have called it a modern noodle Western, but it's definitely, it's not something you'd want to show necessarily your 17-year-old son or your 70-year-old mother. But this gangster, one of the characters in the movie, and his hot girlfriend incorporate food into their sex play. Interesting, in an interesting way. There's one scene where they're passing the yolk of an egg back and forth between each other's mouths to each other without breaking the yolk. And there's another scene where the gangster puts a live, I don't know if it's a crustacean, on her stomach, this sea creature, and lets it squirm around on her. It's great stuff, people. Great stuff. If you haven't seen Tampopo, which means dandelion, you need to see it, because Criterion put it out on Blu-ray. It's amazing. It's amazing. Willow Yang is here. Willow Yang says, you just reminded me of this guy at work who grew his hair out super long and then one day without warning comes in with a shaved head. Yeah, you got to change it up. You never know. You got to change it up. I liked having the beard. Maybe I'll grow it again. People liked it, but you know what? I felt, I always say I'm old with one foot in the grave, but that's one thing. But when you start looking old, at least when I can still convince myself when I look in the mirror, I'm not as old as I am. And with that beard, I was looking old, man. I was looking old, but that's just me. Matouine says, I've always wanted Bjork to sing a Bond theme song. Perhaps it's too late for that to happen. Well, they haven't announced it. It's a big deal. Who is going to sing No Time to Die? Or are they going to call the song No Time to Die? I mean, for Quantum of Solace, they went, by the way, Quantum of Solace has, in my mind, the most underrated James Bond theme song. Alicia Keys and Jack White singing Another Way to Die, which is this dirty and surly song, and I love it. Not dirty like sexually dirty. It's got a dirty feel to it, dirty electric guitar. I love Another Way to Die. I think it's a great song. I do not like the opening. They used a different design team. The Daniel Kleinman, who was introduced doing the opening credits, he took over from the great Maurice Binder, who did all of the James Bond opening title sequences in 1995 for GoldenEye. Daniel Kleinman came in, and man, does he knock those. If you just look at the opening sequences GoldenEye was amazing. Casino Royale, another great opening title sequence. But Mark Forrester, I don't know if it was his team or he decided to replace Daniel Kleinman, but the opening of Quantum of Solace with the song Another Way to Die, I don't think was very well served. I didn't even like the font they used in the opening titles, but sue me. I don't know. Bjork would have been great to sing a Bond theme song. Even back when she was with the Sugar Cubes, that would have been cool to to have a Bjork theme song. I think it'd be great. Be a little weird, but it would be great. I can't wait to hear who does the theme song. I hope it's classical. I mean, I loved classical, meaning has that classical feel rather than modern. They've had Another Way to Die was very modern. A View to a Kill was very modern. I love that theme song. But I also like, even when I was a kid, I loved Shirley Bassey's three theme songs. She didn't just sing Remember. She didn't just sing Goldfinger. She also sang the theme song for Diamonds Are Forever. They are all I need to please me. They can stimulate and tease me. And then, of course, she sang the theme song to Moonraker. I'm a huge fan of that classical chanteuse, smoky lounge singer belting it out, that sensual, anything's going to happen tonight in this bar. I think if a James Bond theme song can evoke that. But then again, they went like kind of disco with Lulu and Mouth Golden Gun. He has a powerful weapon, charges $1 million a shot. An assassin, second to none. The man with the golden gun. One golden shot means another poor victim. I love James Bond theme songs. I can sing them all. I don't know how well. I don't know if I should sing them all now. But I could if I was called upon to do so. Just one of the many chats or many hidden talents that I have. Stubble McShave says, a gentle giant, an old bard, a false messianic figure, and a vile antagonist was announced in an upcoming TV series that I have an interest in. I wonder what that might be. Did they name the actor who is playing that person? I have to say that one of the great joys of this channel is vicariously experiencing Stubble McShave's delight and anticipation and love of Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series and his excitement for the upcoming television show. I love his enthusiasm. I love when he writes letters about it. I love when he talks about it. It's fantastic. Mark C is back again. Mark C says, laugh out loud. The real issue with the spit curl comes from trying to get the curl going the right way in the head of hair parted on the wrong side. I'm surprised no one figured that out. They even had a stunt spit curl that they could put in. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's maybe it's because he's from a different universe, the Kingdom Come universe. It's tough. I don't know. But yes, I think Brandon Routh looks great as the Kingdom Come version of Superman. I even made a meme. Somebody sent me the picture. I stole the picture of Brandon Routh choking out the Supergirl Superman, that the Tyler Hoechlin version of Superman, and I made a meme. I put physical media and streaming and tweeted it out. We'll see if it goes viral. But yeah, I did. That's my meme, by the way. I made that meme. So if anyone sees that, I did that. Thomas Berg says, just have to share. Great week at work. It is Wednesday, I guess. Great week at work. Dark Star yesterday and Star Trek the Motion Picture today. 2001 and Alien this weekend and Dune next week, all in 35 millimeter. Well, that's amazing. That's incredible. What a great week, Dark Star. I'd love to see a print of Dark Star. I've only seen a print of Dark Star once. And my only problem with, I grew up loving film. I love seeing film prints. I was like, oh, we have to go see this print. But for a lot of the movies that I would go see, they're now old. Like I used to go catch anything in 70 millimeter I could. But now when you go back and you see a 70 millimeter print, it's the same 70 millimeter print you saw 30 years ago. And a lot of the time, the prints have become disappointing. And I never thought I'd be that guy that's like, I'm photochemical for life. But, seeing a really well done DCP in a theater, I find more enjoyable. I just like seeing it bigger. And yes, I know it's sacrilegious for me to say, but I've been so disappointed. I mean, I used to go to so many revival screenings in LA. Something would play, and when I would go see a print, it was just very, very disappointing when you'd see a film print that was not in the best of shape. It was a bummer. So I don't see it as much. I mean, I'd love to hear back from you. how good were the prints that were being shown? Because, well, I'll get to that next. I've got a letter I'll read right away. Galactic train spotting. How Galaxy Express 999 of you. Galactic Train Spotting says, great content, sir. You are an abundance of film knowledge. Well, thank you very much, Galactic Train Spotting. You know, it's funny. When you said that, that's the first thing that popped into my mind is Galaxy Express 999, and there's another Galaxy Express movie's coming out on Blu-ray soon. So I'm very excited about that. I like the idea of Galactic Train Spotting. I think that's what a cool idea that is. I like that very much. One day, Jared Mananin, have you seen The Report yet? The Adam Driver political thriller. The trailer looks so good. I have not watched The Report. I do want to see The Report. I have not watched it. I know it's streaming now. I just haven't caught up with it, but I definitely, absolutely want to see that movie. Speaking of film prints, speaking of Star Trek The Motion Picture. By the way, as everyone knows, December 7th of this year, which is in 3 days, today's the 4th, right? In 3 days, December 7th, 2019 marks the 40th anniversary of the release of Star Trek The Motion Picture, which is amazing. I was very fortunate the other day we recorded a new episode of the Inglorious Treksperts with former Star Trek Discovery showrunner Brian Fuller, who also worked on Deep Space Nine and Star Trek Voyager. He also created the Hannibal TV series. He is on. I don't know if we're going to drop that episode. I guess it'll drop on Saturday, maybe. What a fun time. He had a lot of really great insights into Star Trek The Motion Picture, and it was great to talk with him about it. We've been celebrating on the Inglorious Treksperts Star Trek The Motion Picture all year. If you haven't caught up with the Inglorious Treksperts podcast, I'm not on every time. I'm a sort of a recurring guest, but I love doing the show. And I love talking about Star Trek The Motion Picture, so check that out. The Saturday, which was supposed to be my 300th show, but I'm a little bit behind. Plus, I'm working. We're having, if you know what the movie Trivia Schmodown is, my character has been called upon to be at a live event on Saturday. So probably on December 15th, I will actually be the 300 show is going to be a big extravaganza. As everyone knows, my 300th show is going to be 300 minutes long, and we'll see what we can see. It'll be fun. It will be fun indeed. So this letter comes from Jerry Kelly. Hi, Rob. I wanted to share my recent experience with you, having just returned from a screening here at London's Prince Charles Cinema of Star Trek The Motion Picture. Even though the print appeared to be from 1979, it was faded and scratched. I was blown away. We didn't get the DCP you had in the States. Firstly, on the big screen, the movie seems to have a natural 3D quality to it. When the Enterprise is leaving space dock, I felt like I was actually viewing it from space. I usually see the movie in its director's edition form, but I have to say that the theatrical version held up pretty well. Looking at the performances of the actors, you can see how much of the film hinges on Shatner's performance. He really adds an intensity that I don't think any other actor could have brought. In fact, all of the cast really improves upon their TOS performances. From a story perspective, I also noticed a few points I've been missing in past viewings. I truly believe that this film needs to be seen on the biggest screen possible. There really is no comparison. Anyway, I hope to see you next year at the screening of the new Bond movie. P.S. I founded the Facebook page for Star Trek The Motion Picture Director's Edition on 4K, which I guess we all hope will finally happen. Thanks for reading. Best, Jerry Kelly. Well, for those of you who don't know, Star Trek The Motion Picture as it exists was always sort of considered by director Robert Wise a rough cut of the film. It was rushed into theaters because, well, it wasn't rushed into theaters, but it was locked into a release date. And with various production delays and losing the first visual effects company, the film literally was quite rushed. They needed, if they had another 6 months, it would have been, I think, a better film. But the theater, the movie that ended up in theaters on December 7th, 1979 was never quite finished. And back in the late 90s and early aughts, a team of friends of mine, including Darren Doctorman, one of the Inglorious Treksperts, worked with director Robert Wise, who had directed Day the Earth Stood Still and Sound of Music and West Side Story, co-directed West Side Story. He directed Star Trek the Motion Picture, and they went back with him, and they were able to add some effect shots and do some re-editing, and they refined Star Trek the Motion Picture into the Star Trek the Motion Picture Director's Edition, where they had taken footage that had only existed previously in an extended television cut, and they went in, and Robert Wise was able to get the film and really finish it the way he wanted to finish it. And that was released on DVD in 2001, but that version of the movie was only finished in standard def. It was only finished for DVD because there wasn't any high def, and there wasn't a lot of foresight there, and it was, of course, budgetarily hampered in the first place, so they didn't have a lot of money to spend doing it. But it's still, to me, it's the definitive version of the movie. It's not perfect, but it's certainly the definitive version of the movie, because the whole movie, Star Trek the Motion Picture, from a character standpoint, is really about Spock. Star Trek the Motion Picture is a movie where I think the real protagonist, the central protagonist of Spock, is Spock, and his journey toward discovering. He begins the movie wanting to get rid of all human emotion, and in the director's edition, all of the scenes that are retained is all about how Spock discovers that what he's missed out on this whole time is to embrace emotion. So by the end of the film, in fact, one of my favorite moments in all of Star Trek history, there's a moment where Spock, after he's mind melded with the probe with V'ger, he comes back after having his brain fried up, and he realizes what's really going on, and he takes Kirk's hand and he says, listen, V'ger must evolve, because this simple feeling, as he's holding on to the hand of his dear friend Kirk, is beyond V'ger's comprehension. So the whole film, and it's so much better in the director's edition, Spock's journey, he transforms. I mean, like any great story, it's very transformative for Spock. He begins wanting to purge all of his emotions, and then in confronting the ultimate logic in the universe, he discovers that logic without emotion is just barren. And I've always loved that film, and I've always seen, talking with Brian Fuller, I highly recommend listening to the Inglorious Treksperts podcast, because Brian Fuller was really interesting. He had watched the motion picture the night before we did it, and it was great. It was great to do that podcast. But it's by far my favorite Star Trek movie. Look, I like Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. I do. But Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, it seems it's almost like it's a different movie. Again, there was Balance of Terror, of course. The original series episode is a riff on submarine movies, so I don't have any problem with leaning into the whole nautical aspects of Starfleet and all of that. But to me, Star Trek the Motion Picture tells a really interesting story, a really interesting science fiction story, and it advanced the Star Trek universe, and I love the scope of it. I love the feel of it. Star Trek the Motion Picture makes the universe feel ominous and dangerous and strange, but at the same time sort of wonderful. And I really love Star Trek the Motion Picture a lot, even though I've been pilloried for that love for most of my life. So yeah, sometimes I've tried to convince people of the greatness of Star Trek the Motion Picture. Some people buy into it, other people's maybe not so much, but you just never know. Magic K says, I sent you a letter about the leader of the Snyder Cut trending. I am officially joined in Rob's letter gang. Well, for those of you who don't know or haven't been following the whole Snyder Cut, I'm loath to rehash it all, but as many people know, I have, by the way, been an outspoken supporter of Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. And I also like the ultimate cut of Batman v Superman. I've talked about it on the show. Well, as you all know, Zack Snyder was directing Justice League. Now, what happened when Justice League came out, which people seem to forget, especially when Batman v Superman came out, Justice League had already gone into production. And even though Batman v Superman made almost $1 billion, didn't quite get there. I think it was like 850 million or something. It was considered a disappointment because with marketing, the movie was like 450 million all in. So it was considered a disappointment that it didn't cross $1 billion. And there was a lot of people, a lot of fanboys, especially the theatrical version of Batman v Superman was lacking. A lot of fanboys did not dig it. I thought there was a lot of strange stuff in there. This idea that Apocalypse was kind of represented, but we don't know what Apocalypse is. With Nightmare Batman, we don't know what any of that stuff is. He had this nightmare and saw Superman being evil, and what was that doing in the movie? And Batman, Gotham and Metropolis are across the bay from each other. There's a lot of weird stuff in it, but I liked it. And what's interesting, so Zack Snyder was making Justice League, but in midstream, he had a family tragedy, and he was basically replaced as the director of Justice League. He'd been working on the film for 2.5 years. He was replaced, and he was replaced by Joss Whedon, who had directed Avengers and Avengers Age of Ultron, and Joss Whedon finished Justice League. And I think Justice League is a kind of a disaster. I like all the characters, but it's not what it should be. And they brought Henry Cavill back. They needed to lighten up the movie, and he couldn't shave his mustache because he was shooting Mission Impossible Fallout. So there's all these weird, dodgy visual effects on his upper lip to remove his mustache. And the film has it just doesn't feel, it doesn't have what Zack Snyder was bringing. And I liked what Zack Snyder was bringing for this particular project. There was something painterly and something epic about his images of the superheroes. I like the way he fetishized the DC heroes on camera. I thought it was great. But he was replaced, and because Justice League was a complete disappointment for everybody, it was a disappointment financially. It was a disappointment from a story standpoint. It was not a good movie because it was an amalgamation. It was like a Frankenstein patchwork quilt of what Zack Snyder had done before, and then what Joss Whedon was come in to do was rewrite it, make it light and lively or funny like Avengers was. I mean, I don't know what the thinking behind it was, but Zack Snyder left. Well, now everybody wants to see Zack Snyder's version of Justice League, and apparently he's been teasing and talking to people, and people have been, of course, you've heard hashtag release the Snyder Cut. And today to fuel, everyone's like, well, people have said, I've seen the finished version of it. Zack Snyder tweeted a photograph of film cans. Now, these are film cans you would carry finished prints, literally celluloid prints of a movie. And it's labeled as if it was a real thing. So Zack Snyder, and everyone's, of course, using this picture because Zack Snyder said, see, I told you it's real. And of course, everybody who wants the Snyder Cut released, which there's a myriad of problems. There's so many problems why you couldn't just do that. But Zack has been trolling this group, and I do think he's trolling, and he's using it to stir up. I mean, I think what he's doing is brilliant, frankly. I chuckle every time he puts up something. But so he put up this picture of these film cans. Well, even if there is a finished cut of the movie, I don't know if the film was shot on film or if it was shot digitally. I would imagine it probably was shot digitally, but maybe it wasn't. But he put up pictures of these film cans, and I'm like, the movie is apparently 214 minutes long on film, and it was just funny. I laughed, and everyone's like, see, this is proof. This is real. Well, sometimes I think Zack Snyder needs to come out and be absolutely realistic and just flat out say, why does he do a fan event where you can just take questions and answer them? I mean, he's been playing coy and putting out these pictures and allowing the internet to do the work. But I think that he really should sit down for 5 minutes and answer some definitive questions. Hell, I'll even volunteer to ask those questions because coming from a post-production background, I could figure out within 60 seconds, I could square away everything that we need to know. But I thought that tweeting film cans was pretty funny. So kudos to him. Captain Robert April, I hope you're feeling better, Captain. The K.D. Lang's Surrender, he's saying that a best Bond theme should have been K.D. Lang's Surrender, which is from Tomorrow Never Dies. It was going to be. K.D. Lang sang a song called Surrender that they did not use over the opening credits of Tomorrow Never Dies. I think it's why am I drawing a blank? Is it Garbage? Shirley Manson? They didn't use it, And it was her song is much more along the lines of a Shirley Bassey track. It bummed me out. I think Surrender is a great song. But, why they had this obsession to use the title of the movie and the songs. They kind of drifted away from that sometimes, because Another Way to Die was certainly not the title of Quantum of Solace. But it's definitely interesting. But yeah, that's a great, great, great song. If you haven't heard that song, it's worth getting, because it's a really, really good song. Let's see. This letter comes from Ivan Maris. Hi, Rob. I wanted to touch upon something that has been bothering me for a while now. As a longtime Star Wars fan, I'm ecstatic whenever something Star Wars is about to be released. And that wasn't any different with The Mandalorian coming out a few weeks ago. But at the same time, due to my profession, having a master's degree in film and TV editing, I can't help myself looking at everything, Star Wars included, from a certain slightly more objective standpoint. What I've realized was The Mandalorian is actually a pretty mediocre show. Now, don't get me wrong. I love The Mandalorian. I can't help it, because it is, Star Wars. And a good Star Wars also. But amidst all of the Star Wars references, fan service, and really great visuals, I can't find much substance in it. Not in terms of story, characters, pacing, emotion, and all the other relevant factors that make a show or a movie great, regardless of the franchise. Yes, it does have all of those things, but not to an extent that I can say, this is something extraordinary, something that I crave for. I feel if you exclude all of the Star Wars context from the show and watch it just as a show, it would feel fairly underwhelming. Not bad, just not great either. And whenever I raise this topic with anyone that is a Star Wars fan, the counter argument would always be, the point is in the Star Wars context, which actually makes me really sad. I thought we would want to aspire to have a show, a great show, in a galaxy far, far away, not just a show that panders to fans and leaves nothing much to the rest, to expand the fandom and to have it even bigger than it already is. And that's the main reason why I'm sad with The Last Jedi reception. Yes, it wasn't a perfect film. It had some major flaws, mainly in pacing. But even though my initial opinion of the film, which was quite high, dropped a bit, I would still argue with anyone that it was the best directed and maybe even best written, at least the majority of it, Star Wars film we've ever had. But it was too different. It wasn't familiar. Tried something new. Rian Johnson, how dare you? And in the past 2 years, this feeling of sadness that I feel keeps getting confirmed whenever something gets released that fans more or less universally approve, whether it is the Vader short film from Star Wars Theory or now The Mandalorian. So basically all that Disney can get from fans is make anything, regardless of quality, just set it in a familiar era, so you can't change anything that has been established, and therefore there will be a ton of references and fan service, or B, with familiar characters, which is almost the same thing. What's even funnier to me is all the claims that this feels like Star Wars. How? Because it has so many familiar beats and references, so it feels like Star Wars? Well, if you look at it that way, you're right. But to me, The Mandalorian actually feels the least Star Wars we've had in a while. This feels like a Western set in Star Wars lore. And yes, I do acknowledge the fact that the original trilogy was partially a Western in space, but it wasn't Clint Eastwood's Western. It was its own thing. This, however, feels more like a Clint Eastwood Western than it feels like Star Wars. If you must change the names and looks of the Mandalorians, the Jawas, or Baby Yoda, does it really feel Star Wars? I know these things all further the feel itself, but there's no reason why a Star Wars show or film couldn't be a Clint Eastwood Western. It's just funny to me to say that something feels a certain way when it is so vastly different than everything before. And for The Last Jedi, that actually had a Star Wars feel to it, but without so many obvious references, it's considered, this doesn't feel like Star Wars. To a certain point, I do understand fans. I too sometimes want more of this and more of that, but after 40 years of pretty much the same, I do exclude the Knights of the Old Republic games as an anomaly to the rule. I grew tired of the familiar. Not that I don't like it anymore. It's just becoming too restricting to be inventive, original, and not cyclically repeat every beat of the story that has been told so many times before. And when someone tries to change things up a bit, Ryan, they get roasted. The point is, I don't know how many people that are Star Wars fans in Europe. Star Wars is not as popular and beloved as the USA, but I would love to have a film or show that is primarily a great film or a great show to tell my friends who are not Star Wars fans, go and watch this. This is an amazing show or this is an amazing film. And I simply can't. Not to someone who doesn't love the universe already, because they won't pick up on why Baby Yoda is amazing. They might find it cute, but nothing more. They won't understand the epicness or get the chills when a bunch of Mandalorians appear to save the day and the sin. That's the name of the episode. I'm 100% certain that if the show continues this way, there will be a bunch of fans requesting a ton of Emmy wins for the show, completely oblivious of the actual quality. And that's actually the worst thing. I do want to get Emmy-worthy Star Wars shows or Oscar-worthy Star Wars films. But I don't think we're going to get that level of quality anytime soon, with fans requesting to get only fan service and references in expense of great storytelling and or characters. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Am I crazy to feel this way, or do you agree? I have spoken. Well, Ivan, dude, I think you pretty much nailed it. Look, I think seeing the Star Wars iconography in a show that isn't necessarily, say, dumb, or it doesn't have the line deliveries or the clunky dialogue that we got in the prequels, people like all that. I think you're absolutely right. My problem so far with The Mandalorian, and we are halfway through the show, what's it about? Like, I really don't have a sense of what the show is actually. I mean, hey, I'm wearing my Baby Yoda shirt because why couldn't I did jump on the bandwagon. I saw, oh, there's a Baby Yoda shirt. Click. It's actually official Star Wars merchandise. So I'm like, okay, I'll buy that because I wanted to be hip and trendy. But I think the problem with this show is we're seeing the visualizations of these Star Wars things. Like, hey, here's some Mandalorians, and you'll learn a little bit about Beskar armor or something like that. But none of the show, in my mind, as much as I enjoy watching The Mandalorian, it doesn't hang together. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. This idea you're tracking your bounty, well, how? Have they shoved is it a genetic tracker? How far away do you have to be? Did they shove a tracking device up your keister when you weren't looking? I mean, how are they able to track you across space and across planets and all of that? Why does everybody exist on the same street corner? They're playing, to me, they're let's do the show where you've got to break a mare. So we'll have the Mandalorian have to learn to ride a creature. He does funny things like, okay, he parks his spaceship kind of in the middle of nowhere and then is surprised when Jawas come back and they're taking it apart. Why are there Jawas all over the galaxy? I thought Jawas were indigenous to Tatooine, but apparently they're not. I mean, maybe I just don't know my Star Wars lore, but it's distracting when you're going to planets and there's just a bunch of Jawas around. Why is there a Gonk droid? Why are there? I understand it's familiar, it's fan service and all that, but I'm not. Ultimately, I don't know what the Mandalorian's supposed to do. He's certainly not on a mission, not anymore. He took his bounty. He brought what he was supposed to bring back. He had a crisis of conscience, and he left with his bounty to presumably rescue the bounty, as if we don't even know yet if that bounty needed to be rescued. But so now he's traveling around the universe doing what exactly? He's pissed his livelihood off. He's pissed this guy that apparently, or everybody that gives him jobs to do. And what's he going to do? Like, he flies to a planet, he's going to hang out? I don't know. And I'll tell you this. Right now, The Mandalorian doesn't have much of a story at all. I mean, basically what we've seen is 2-hour-long episodes of TV, but there's still no overarching story. What does The Mandalorian want? Apparently not much. He just wanted to hole up for a while and hang out with, like, the native girls. And now he didn't know Cara Dune was on that planet, but now, of course, she is, and she's hanging out and with him, and I don't know what, and he's going to leave, and where's he going? He doesn't. The show has no narrative thrust for me. So I agree with you. I think people like it because it's not stupid. They like seeing. It's cool to see somebody battle Jawas on a sandcrawler. That's something I've always wanted to see, and we get to see it. But yes, I mean, The Mandalorian right now, I think mostly what it really was supposed to do was set up a production pipeline with all of this there's new stagecraft technology that I talked about in an earlier show. What they did, what The Mandalorian is, it's proving you can make a Star Wars show for a price on a weekly basis, get it out fast, and that's what they've done. They've pioneered all this new technology with these new backgrounds, these projection backgrounds. Not projection, but the stagecraft technology. They've proven that they can do this. And I think that's what is most important about The Mandalorian. But I do hope it gets better. I feel exactly the same way that you feel about it. I could not recommend The Mandalorian. I'd recommend it to every Star Wars fan because it'll put a big smile on your face. But if you're not a Star Wars fan, there's literally all you are doing is watching classical Western scenes transposed into the Star Wars universe. And there needs to be more than that. There needs to be a story, an overarching story. And we're getting a little bit of that, but not really. I want The Mandalorian to get better. I mean, I really do. And I think it will probably, at least it's going to get interesting. That's right, Sheryl Crow. Mark C says Sheryl Crow sings Tomorrow Never Dies. Garbage sings The World Is Not Enough. That's right. Say I can't, there's so much in my head. What can I do? But yes, that's right. I was wrong. Thank you for that, Mark C. Jet Screamer says, life clocks are a lie. Carousel is a lie. That is, of course, from 1976's seminal adaptation of George Clayton Johnson and William F. Nolan's novel from the 60s, Logan's Run, which was, until Star Wars, my favorite movie. When I was 9 years old, Logan's Run blew my mind. Not only are there naked girls in the love shop, but you got to see the first instance of future Tinder. What's going on? Why are you barking? What's happening? I don't even know where you are. But yeah, I do love Logan's Run. What's going on? Why are you barking, Tallulah? Tallulah is, of course, slightly insane. Gilbert's much quieter than Tallulah is. I don't know why, but she is. People have told me that Irish setters aren't the smartest dogs in the world. No offense to anybody who has Irish setters. Tallulah's half Irish setter. I think she's damn cute, but she is no great intellect. Are you, Tallulah? No. You just like to be petted. She is a delightful dog, however. Right? But, yeah, if you haven't seen Logan's Run, come on, get on that. Everybody should see Logan's Run. Man, I've seen Logan's Run so many times. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I've seen Logan's Run in my life. A lot. So, yeah. Now, let's see, I got a few more letters. I have not caught up. I'm so behind on letters. So if you sent me letters, I'm catching up. So I will get to your letter, I promise. This letter is another letter from Joe Foley. It's a quick one. It's about Dr. Sleep. Hey, Rob, I hope you are shining on today because I just walked. Oh, wait, I already wrote this. Oh, wait, maybe not. Hey, Rob, I hope you are shining on today because I just walked out of Dr. Sleep and I have some thoughts. It may have been the best horror movie I've seen in the past decade. Wow. And that's saying a lot because it wasn't even scary. Don't get me wrong, it was still a disturbing and anxiety-driven experience with solid directing that wasn't as strong as Kubrick's vision, but the story and writing really shined for me. How much was taken from the books, I may never know. I loved seeing Ewan McGregor as Danny Torrance because he's one of my favorite actors. He didn't go full Nicholson like I was hoping, but I still found it enjoyable. I also found the antagonist more compelling than I was expecting. I hated her. My biggest gripes are with the third act. I think they made the right choice on where to take it, but ultimately I feel it was filled with missed opportunities and wasn't executed as strongly as the rest of the film. Not to mention, the ending shot leaves me with a question that I'm not sure is intentional or not. And while they deeply expand on the mythos of the Shining ability, I was hoping they'd expand on the mythos of the Outlook Hotel as well. They didn't really do that. Despite this, it brought in compelling new ideas, yet still felt like a satisfying expansion to the original Shining, with maybe a bit too much fan service. I can't wait to talk more in depth about this film in a future letter, and I encourage my fellow imagination connoisseurs not to sleep on Dr. Sleep while it's still in theaters, although I do warn that the subject matter is extremely dark, so know what you're getting into. Joe F. P.S. It may be the brownies talking, but I swear there was one close-up shot where Ewan McGregor is meditating, and it makes him look just like Jack Nicholson. Yeah, I thought Dr. Sleep, both the book and the movie. The movie, as I've talked about before, is such a weird thing in Hollywood history that it's an adaptation of a book that's a sequel to another book, and then it's also a sequel, and it's a sequel to a movie, the movie adaptation of the book that the author of the original book didn't really like. So basically, you've got a movie that's an adaptation of the book Dr. Sleep, which is a direct sequel to Stephen King's novel, The Shining, and yet it's also a sequel to Kubrick's version of The Shining, which is completely different than King's version of The Shining, and it tries to do both. I've talked about how that's kind of a crazy thing to do, but it does try and do that. And I don't think any movie in history has quite done that before. And it's pretty interesting. I mean, I have to give it up. I have to give it up for what they tried to do there. And Mike Flanagan, man, he's turning into quite the director. And I think, horror is definitely his forte. And I really like what he did. There's a lot to love in Dr. Sleep. But yeah, I'm with you. I thought it was quite a good film. Don Stellato says, my mom loves The Mandalorian and never watched Star Wars. Well, you know what? I can understand that because literally The Mandalorian is a classic Western. It's replaying all the beats. Let's save the villagers. I've got my bounty. I have to take care of a person. In this case, Baby Yoda. I'm meeting fellow travelers along the way. It is totally an homage to classic Westerns. Although I think the whole show is a test bed, like I said. But I think it works that way. That's why I'm enjoying it. I'm like, oh, the same way I talked about before, a movie like Silverado, which I really like, Larry Kasdan's Silverado from 1985, played a lot with Western tropes and sort of made them more modern, had a more modern approach to the characters, but it's still very much a classical Western. The Mandalorian is just playing classical Western beats in the Star Wars universe, and I'm enjoying it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but there's some strange, there's things that I wonder about that I don't quite understand. And I guess this is a spoiler, but not really. But in the last episode, you have some villagers, these nice people that they seem to be living peacefully, and they catch fish and grow things. And they have a nice community, but somehow within walking distance, there's a band of raiders that come in and want to wreck all their stuff. And the first thing I thought about was, well, they're not occupying the lands. It's like a hit and run. They come in, they burn some shit up, they shoot some people, they take the food, and they leave. Why aren't they trading? Why aren't these people just coming in and buying their food, or why are they mad at each other? Why is this group of ruffians, aside from the fact that the script wants them to be bad guys, and they seem to have an old they have an old ATST, an Imperial Scout Walker. These people clearly, why do you need to have a scout? They're not fighting you. I'm sure if you rolled in and said, hey man, we'd love to perhaps trade, or can we have some of your fish, or whatever it was, you don't even know why they're doing it. And it seems sort of counterproductive on this planet that also has a city where, or is it a city or a little town where, why don't they just all come in and sell their wares there? It's odd to me that everybody that lives within, it felt like they live within just a couple of miles of this village. They roll in, steal shit, and leave. And it's like, why are you doing that? It felt like, okay, in Westerns, this is the case. I mean, you had cattle ranches, you had cattle that needed to be driven, and people were stealing stuff. That I understood, and I get that. But in this case, what I've had a problem with as far as Favreau's writing goes is, well, one episode, you've got all these different people that live apparently on the same street. And that's what happened in Old West towns. The bar, the brothel would be down the street, and the sheriff's office would be up to the other end of the street. And there was always static between these different factions. And you got it because it was a Western town. But it just seems like when you've got Mandalorians and you have bounty hunters and you've got the ex-Imperial officers, and they're all in the same street with one another, you'd think that, Werner Herzog wouldn't be going, man, seeing Mandalorians is really, really rare. Well, of course, unless you walk down the street and took that staircase down to where all the Mandalorians happen to live, it just seems such a strange. What do they never get out? They never go to the local bar. There's a lot of strange things like that. But I am ultimately enjoying The Mandalorian. I am. I think The Mandalorian is good, and I'm enjoying where it's going, and I like its classical Western tropes. I do. I do. I'm enjoying watching it. But yes, I wish there was a lot more to it. And I think its biggest weakness is I don't know what story they're telling. I don't think The Mandalorian has been well defined yet. Maybe that's coming. Factual opinions here. Boy, factual opinion. How excited are you for next week's episode of Watchmen, huh? Am I right? By the way, I've turned a corner, man. I am a Watchmen fan. Against my better judgment, I love the Watchmen series. I'm loving it. Loving it. I can't believe what they've done with it. I still have one overarching problem for me. It seems like Damon Lindelof wanted to make a show about race relations and how things haven't really changed. And I think that's great. And then he used the Watchmen framework to do it. And that, I think that there's a lot of concepts in Watchmen that he's not even beginning to touch on, but I get what he's trying to do. And I think he's done something really interesting. It's really interesting. I hope he sticks to the landing. It's clearly the best thing I think he's ever been involved with. And if you're a fan of the Watchmen comic, as I am, boy, do they do deep dives into that comic. I really respect what he has done. And but I also still feel like there's a bit of that drama club in there. A lot of it is almost too clever for its own good. But it's certainly interesting. And I find it to be riveting television. So Factual Opinion says, Enterprise Season 1 is better than TNG Season 1. You know what? I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think there was more consistency in Season 1 of Enterprise. But you know what? In a way, it's sort of an unfair comparison because after TNG and Deep Space Nine and Voyager, and they had all that time to refine their storytelling, I would hope that Season 1 of Enterprise was better than the first season of TNG. I mean, they've learned so much. But I do think, again, there are weaknesses in Star Trek Enterprise. But I would tend to agree. I think the first season of Enterprise was stronger overall. You don't have episodes like Code of Honor. You'll have no treaty, no vaccine, and no Lieutenant Yar. I mean, or Justice. The Edo, they're running around and you trip in their garden and suddenly you can be put to death where the beautiful people are running everywhere in their scantily clad outfits. There's none of that nonsense. So you're probably absolutely right. Rick Berg says, one of the greatest movie quotes ever came from Glover in Silverado. Yeah. I love Silverado. I've got the Blu-ray, the booklet. It went out of print quickly. I don't know if you can Silverado in print, but I really love that film. I love the cast. It's so great to see all of those people together because they are all amazing. And I am a big fan. So, yeah, indeed. Well, listen, everyone, I'm going to do a short, I've got so much I have to do. But I'm going to jump off this chat now, a little short chat, a little 75-minute chat. I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank, first of all, of course, my moderators. I want to thank Louis Yu. I want to thank Jordy Lyons. I want to thank Greg Smith. And Greg Smith, we should all say a prayer for his goat Apricot, who's no longer with us. So this show is dedicated to Apricot's memory. He was He was Greg's favorite goat. I guess Apricot was a she. She's no longer with us. But yes, so Greg Smith and, of course, Detective Jim and the great Honorable Mayor Mike Bodden of Riverdale, Iowa. I want to thank all of you for helping out and doing what you can to make this community, the Post-Geek Singularity, for all of you imagination connoisseurs, the best community it can be. I also want to thank Lucky Tiger for sponsoring these chats. I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel through all of your various things. And by the way, the website, blowing up, man. If you go to the website and you just comment on something, you can you might be able to win something. You might be able to win a bottle of Lucky Tiger men's head to tail body wash. Fantastic. Who doesn't want that? I know I want more of that. And I want to thank everybody that supports the channel, whether you're on the website at theburnettwork.net. And if you comment on anything, you get entered into a drawing for another bottle of Lucky Tiger men's head to tail body wash, which is good. So I'm going to be back tomorrow. I'm going to be on the John Campea show tomorrow. I wasn't going to be, but I'm going to be. I think I'm going to be on the John Campea show tomorrow and Friday. Wow. And I'll be back here on Robservations. I unfortunately will not be here on Saturday again. We'll try and make it on every other day in December, but Saturday I won't be here. Send me more letters. I'm behind on letters. I will catch up, but we will get there. The month of December, it's going to be fun. We're approaching the 300th episode. The whole show is going to change. It's going to be a different show. I'm even going to have things like Hot Toys camera. I can just cut to my Hot Toys shelf. So it'll be a camera just looking at a part of the Hot Toys shelf. Not like this. It's going to be totally lit up and totally different. You'll be able to see everything. I'm telling you, it's going to be a lot of fun. So anyway, I will then say, I'm going to say what do I always say? I always say, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, everyone, I will say, have a better day. And go watch that No Time to Die trailer over and over again, because I'm going to. I'm totally going to.